Yeah, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Today's Monday. That means it's time to update the top 25. Today's also a holiday, Columbus Day. Kids are out of school. They want to go to the movies today. So I've got to take them, or I don't have to. I'm looking forward to it, actually, taking them to the movies here right after lunch. I don't have time right now to film, edit, and upload my entire top 25 video. I'll try to do that this afternoon. But I do have my new top 10, and I will go over that with you right now. Actually, I made it to 12, so I've got my top 12. See, contrary to popular belief, I actually sit down, I look at what all the teams did last week and over the course of the season, and I try to reevaluate my top 25 every week. It's not as easy for me as just looking at my last week's top 25 and say, well, they won, they're staying there. They lost, they dropping. They had a good win, they move up. I actually, not that means you have to agree with my rankings. No one agrees with anybody's rankings 100%. I don't expect that. But I do put some time into doing my rankings, and so I only have time before I've got to get ready to go here for the top 12. So rather than just making you wait till tonight for the whole thing, I figured I'd go ahead and do a video here. Top 10, top 12, I guess, and I'll do the entire top 25 and get it up later today. So we're going to have to change the bottom shelf here. So last week's top 10, I had Michigan 1, Florida State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, and Ohio State 5. That bottom row right there, that was the top 5. 6 through 10 last week, I had Washington 6, Oregon 7. Where is that? There we go. Oregon 7. Georgia 8, Southern Cal 9, Oklahoma 10. That was my last week's top 10. All right, let me give you number 11 and 12. These teams are close to being in the top 10, but not quite. Or in the case of one of these teams, they fell out of my top 10. I've got Southern Cal at 12. I've seen enough. Half the season is over. Southern Cal is just way too limited defensively. They're coming off the top 10 shelf. They'll go back up in alphabetical order. So they'll go between UCLA and Utah. I'll have to redo the shelving this afternoon. But Southern Cal, defense horrendous. Again, triple overtime to beat Arizona. The defense just continues to be terrible week in and week out, year in and year out. I am curious to know from the Southern Cal fans, do you get it yet? Do you get it? Have you reached the point Oklahoma fans reached at the end? Or are you still holding out hope that somehow Lincoln Riley will put a decent defense on the field? I've given up all hope. I'm going to have to see it at this point before I will believe it. Now, I picked Southern Cal to make the playoffs in the preseason. I still think they can make the playoffs. I have seen this exact same Lincoln Riley team make the playoffs not once, not twice, but 3 times at Oklahoma. They'll lose if they get there because they only have half a team. And I'm not convinced at this point they'll get into the playoffs. There's some good teams in the Pac-12. We'll see how that works out. Southern Cal's schedule is backloaded. If you look at the first 5 or 6 games of the year for Southern Cal, they're all terrible teams. All of Southern Cal's tough games are from this point forward, starting this week, of course, on the road at Notre Dame. But I had them at 9 last week. I'm moving them down to 12. They beat Arizona, like mentioned, 43-41 in triple overtime, just pathetic. They play on the road this week at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is actually favored in that game. At least they are today. We'll see if the line moves over the course of the week, but I got to keep moving them down. I mean, I don't know if this guy just hates Southern Cal. Yeah, that's why I picked them to make the playoffs, dummy. So look, I moved Georgia down. I had Georgia number 1 at the beginning of the season. They're all the way down at 8. I mean, just because you win doesn't mean you stay where you're at. I've got Southern Cal at 12. I've got Bama at 11. That's up 1 spot from last week. I had Bama at 12 last week. Moved them up to 11. They beat Texas A&M 26-20, and Jalen Mildew actually looked like he knew what he was doing at the quarterback position, which is a minor miracle. This week, they play Arkansas at home, so they should get another win. Couple of tests still looming for Bama. They've got Tennessee and LSU both at home. They've got Auburn on the road. Auburn's a terrible team, but we see weird things happen in the Iron Bowl. So to me, when I look at Alabama's remaining regular season schedule, those are the 3 games that kind of stand out as potential hurdles or roadblocks for Bama in terms of avoiding that second loss, which of course would knock them out of playoff contention. But a good win on the road at Texas A&M, and Mildew played well. The defense is lights out again. Moved them up to 11. Top 10 time. New into my top 10. North Carolina. North Carolina just continues to impress me week in and week out. And I think currently, as it sits today, Drake May is the best quarterback in the country. I think he's playing better than Caleb Williams right now. Not saying he's better than Caleb Williams overall. Not saying that he'll get drafted ahead of Caleb. I could care less about that anyway. But North Carolina's offense and Drake May are operating at an extremely high level right now. They beat the soul out of Syracuse 40-7. They play Miami at home this week. North Carolina, I had at 14. I've moved them up 4 spots. It's not a direct result of beating Syracuse. Syracuse is not a terrible team, but they're not very good either. It's not a result of just them beating Syracuse. It's an accumulation of what they've done this season. I think they deserve to be a top 10 team in the rankings, at least for right now. They've also got a better defense than like Southern Cal, for example. But I've got North Carolina at 10. I dropped Texas down to 9. I had Texas at 3, dropped them down to 9. So, well, we'll do the helmets at the end rather than doing them one by one. We'll do the helmets at the end. So I'll move North Carolina. I'll do that at the end. I'll show you. Texas, I dropped them from 3 to 9. They, of course, lost to Oklahoma 34-30. An amazing Red River Shootout game this past weekend. These two teams are likely going to play again for the Big 12 title. I don't really see a loss on either team's schedule the rest of the year. If either team loses another game, it'll be a major upset. But most likely going to see that game again. Texas is off this week following the rivalry game loss to Oklahoma on Saturday. Oregon, I've got them at 8. They dropped a spot from number 7. Not because they did anything wrong, they didn't play. But it was just because I had to move other teams up, and there was no choice but to move Oregon back. And because Oregon didn't play, so I'm not punishing for not playing them, but I can't reward them for not playing. I just because the way teams are moving around, I had to bump Oregon down a spot to 8, had them at 7. They were off this week. They play on the road at Washington. I've got Washington at 7. So I've got in the rankings for today, Washington 7, Oregon 8. That's down from last week when I had them 6 and 7. So I had them 6 and 7. Now I got them 7 and 8. But they play each other this week. Whoever wins, it'll be a great win. Whoever wins will move up significantly. Whoever loses, of course, will drop. How much they drop, well, that depends on what else happens in and around the top 10 and how bad they lose by, all those kinds of things. Impossible to say right now. But I've got Washington at 7, Oregon at 8. Both teams were off this past weekend. They play each other next week. That game's at Washington. 6 is where I landed with Oklahoma. I moved Oklahoma up from 10 to 6. I had them at 10 last week. They beat Texas like we just talked about, 34-30. They're off this week too. So Oklahoma all the way up to 6. At number 5, I've got Georgia. That's up 3 spots from last week. I had Georgia at 8. I had Georgia at 8 last week. They absolutely destroyed 20th ranked Kentucky 51-13. By far the most complete game of the year that Georgia has played. And that's kind of the Georgia people were waiting to see. And you finally got to see it. Dismantled Kentucky in every way imaginable. Georgia had 600 yards of offense. Kentucky had 180. Georgia's a complete team. Again, going to be tough for anybody to beat. They're not unbeatable. They can definitely be beat by several teams, but they are a complete team. They play this week on the road at Vandy. That'll be their 24th straight win. I've got Georgia at 5. Ohio State 4. Had them at 5 last week. They're up 1 spot to 4. 37-17 over Maryland, who was not ranked but undefeated at 5-0. Probably should have been ranked, but they weren't. But 37-17 over Maryland. Took them a while to get going. It was tied in the fourth quarter, or they were up by 3 in the fourth quarter. Pulled away on them. End up winning by 20. No running game for Ohio State, which is alarming, but Kyle McCord played well, and we all know about their wide receivers. Moved them up to 4. They play this week on the road at Purdue. Penn State. I had them at 4 last week, moved them up to 3. They were off. It's just a result of Texas losing. You know, I had Michigan, Florida State, Texas. Texas lost. Penn State moves up 1. In that case, it literally was that simple. So move Penn State to 3. They didn't play this weekend, like I said, and for no reason at all, they play UMass this week. Poor scheduling here by Penn State. Why do you need an off week before you play UMass? This makes no sense. Get yourself an off week before Michigan or Ohio State, and maybe you can beat them at some point this century. I think Penn State's really, really good, but this is bad scheduling here, a bye week before you host UMass. And then Florida State I left at 2, and Michigan I left at number 1. Michigan beat Minnesota 52-10, another blowout. Look, the who have you played crowd, I get it. They haven't played a great team. They haven't even played a good team, I would argue. Rutgers is probably the best team they've played. They've got their games coming, though. It doesn't matter whether you think Michigan is terrible, elite, or anywhere in between. They've got games coming up against Penn State and Ohio State. And, anything that happens before that is, in terms of arguing about where Michigan should be ranked, is just irrelevant. We all know there's the round robin coming between Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. And whoever wins two out of 3 of those games is going to have a good chance to play for a Big Ten title and get into the playoffs. So there you go. Michigan at 1. They play Indiana at home this week. Florida State 39-17 over Virginia Tech. Not a great game for Jordan Travis, but Florida State's run game exploded. Almost 300 yards rushing. They've got 2 really good running backs. Destroyed a terrible Virginia Tech team 39-17. And they play Syracuse at home this coming week. Another can of corn. So there you go. That's my top 12. Run through it again real quick. 12, Southern Cal. 11, Bama. 10, North Carolina. 9, Texas. 8, Oregon. 7, Washington. 6, Oklahoma. 5, Georgia. 4, Ohio State. 3, Penn State. 2, Florida State. 1, Michigan. There you go. I will try to get the entire top 25 video out sometime this evening after I get back from the movies with the kiddos. And don't forget about the Lunch Money Show tonight at 10 p.m., a live show with me and my boy Pigskin Pete. We're going to take a look at next week's games. All the early lines are out. There's some great games next week. We're going to talk about them tonight at 10 o'clock. I'll see you all there. Have a good morning.